Okay, we are live on YouTube. Good. So I call for order in the public meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. It's the Albany, Wednesday, July 12th, 2023. 6 p.m. And the only thing on the agenda for today is project number 00533. Application UV number 8-40543. Property address is 64 Avenue. Applicant is current South Allen policy. Gentrified and direct. The zoning district is mixed use, form-based, South End, and the request is to modify an existing use variance from manufacturing small electronic parts to any commercial services or no industrial. Maybe.
Adriana, could you just speak directly into the mic just so that it could just go through? No, you're good. I just want to make sure it goes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
So,
No, not yet.
but just some ground rules. We're going to cover that in present first. You know, there was a public comment at a previous meeting kind of related to this. So, but there's not many people right now here. There's no one online yet, right? It does. Anyway, people show up. I'm going to reset before we start the ground rules from our board's bylaws that yes. Name, address, person, organization, and you can set time limits if that's necessary. 10 minutes or the actual 3 minutes for the comments for each individual, 6 for a council member, and 5 minutes for rebuttal. Just setting that just in case people show up.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Andy, for the great work on behalf of the applicant. Andy Kern is some for especially for manufacturing, the current operation on South Fifth Street. And seeking to relocate to 64th Ave. The request before you is to consider modifying a previously granted use variance for the property. The property has actually received 2 use variances in the past. In the mid-1980s, it received the use variance to operate an automotive paint shop, and then in 1994, it received the use variance to engage in light industrial manufacturing. When we had reached out to the planning department, it was determined that the current use is best classified under the new USDO as a heavy commercial services. We had thought it might fit the criteria of artisan manufacturing, which is allowed in the current zone, but it's not. Planning determined it was heavy commercial services. As a result of that, and when we looked at the USDO, we quickly realized that, well, first, the applicant, the prior owner who has since sold to current zone, did initially consider a zone change to seek to change the zoning of the property to industrial. There is industrial zoning in the vicinity, somewhat adjacent to the property, but there was some public concern that extending the industrial zone further up into the form-based South End zone may not have been the best idea. So as a result of that, he had consulted with me and asked me to analyze it. And I said, I looked at it, I said, Zach, you already have a use variance on the property, which is a very powerful land use tool, rarely granted. So this property is very unique. And rather than seeking the zone change to a zoning classification that the neighbors may not necessarily be in support of, why don't we look at amending the existing use variance to allow for the heavy commercial services with specialty flooring use? And when we did that analysis, we quickly realized that the proposed use is significantly less intense than the use that was proposed for the light industrial that received the use variance. So as a result of that, we submitted this application to ask you to consider modifying the existing use variance to further limit its application from light industrial manufacturing to heavy commercial services, specifically for this flooring use. As you know, under the general city law, the criteria for granting a use variance is very difficult and it's very stringent. And also there's a specific requirement that when you do grant a variance, you grant the minimum variance necessary to relieve the hardship. So the variance that was granted in 1994 was the minimum variance granted to relieve the hardship, and it allowed for light industrial. So by our analysis, anything less intense than the light industrial would further reduce the amount of variance granted and bring the property more into conformity with zoning, which is more in keeping with the principles of zoning, that when you grant a variance, it's extreme, and any chance you have to bring it back in further into the zoning fold, so to speak, you take advantage of that. So that's what we're seeking. As a result of that, we would need to demonstrate to you that the proposed use is significantly less intense than the use that was allowed under the light industrial manufacturing variance. As part of our application package, we provided a comparison of IEM, the prior owner's operation, under the light industrial variance to current proposed operation, and we believe it's a significantly less intense use of the property. It achieves the purposes that were raised and the concerns raised by the neighborhood that industrial zoning would allow for much more intense uses and wouldn't be suitable for the zoning at this time. And we agree, but by our approach is to limit it to the flooring business, which wouldn't extend that industrial zoning up. We limit it to a specific use that we can demonstrate is less intense than the allowable use under the zone. No one wants to go back to light industrial manufacturing, which is currently allowed. Lastly, I would say, not to overlawyer it, but there is significant case law in the third department that talks about the zoning board's ability to modify a previous variance, but those cases turn primarily upon amended conditions that were enacted as part of the use variance. That stems from a case called Red House Farm, which is a third department case. However, in the first department, there is a line of cases that picks up where Red House Farm leaves off and talks about allowing for modifications of the variances themselves, following a rational and substantial evidence standard, rather than specifically saying that you don't have to go back and meet all the four elements in the use variance test. And I can provide that to the board. So the third department has a lot of cases that talk primarily about an ending condition. The first department cases, add on to that and talk about actually modifying the variance. And again, when you read them, it's clear that your ability to modify a variance has to start from the presumption that whatever modification you're making is lessening the impact of the variance and allowing for a less intense use of the property. Clearly, I couldn't be here tonight asking you to modify a variance to allow for something more intense. That would require a new variance application. Here, because we're dialing it back to something that is closer to what is allowed by the zoning code, we have the ability, we believe, to ask for the modification, and then it would be a reasonable and substantial evidence test rather than a traditional use variance test. I also understand that we are on the agenda tonight for a public meeting, so I think we still would need to have a public hearing, which we would further, I won't go into our entire presentation tonight, so you don't have to hear it twice, but it's going to be a public hearing. We present, everything we're going to be doing, as well as the letters of support that we have received from the neighbors. But primarily tonight, because this is kind of an oddball, it's not what you usually hear. We want to just come in and explain our thought process, answer any questions, and see if it's scheduled for public hearing.
Questions?
So we're going to be going into the details of the proposed projects that this will be used to access the public hearing.
I can this evening if you'd like. Primarily, it's a relocation of the use on South Pearl Street. We've submitted the site plan to the planning department. They would need DPR development plan review. But it's using the existing building, which is currently vacant. It's been vacant for a while. It improves some parking. It allows for outdoor storage of their trucks or overnight storage. They have a couple of delivery trucks, but also provides enough parking for all the employees. It's a tight site, there's no question about it. But this is why this is the perfect use based upon the size of the operation that they have. This would be the perfect spot for them. It would be difficult to find somebody that could, bring uses into this property without having an impact on the neighborhood, substantial impact. When IEM was running it, they had at one point they had up to 30 people employed. So you can imagine how busy it was with 30 people coming in every day. This is a much less intense use. They have 7 employees, and most of them are installers of site. So it's a difficult site to work with, but we found somebody that's really compatible with the site that they do. So we think it works.
Can you clarify, is the applicant relocating its business or is it adding? I mean, is it maintaining its businesses on the 2 properties in Pearl Street?
My understanding is this is the relocation. I don't have a specific answer to that, but I will get you one. But my understanding is it's relocation.
They made the 2 properties on Pearl Street and then they would both be closing.
They'd be relocating. Here's my understanding. I'll confirm it. And it's important, if you've done a drive-by of their site, South Pearl, if you haven't, I would encourage you to, but just be very careful with property limits, because some of the activity, or how do I say, charitable storage on the property on the outside isn't my guys. It's a neighbor, but when you look by, it's startling. It's like, wow, this is really this could use some improvement. But the property that needs improvement is much more than the neighborhood property. The relocation gives them the ability to have a significant amount of storage inside the building, which is what they're looking for. No significant outdoor storage on the site. Parking the vehicles at night, but all of their flooring, they do specialty flooring. Sort of basketball, things like that, arcade floor, really specialties, and they keep that inside. They also do, I call it antique flooring, but it's historic flooring, where they will rehab old historic floor. They need to store that inside as well. So it's not like they'd be storing anything outside. And the storage that is outside that's occurring in South Pearl is primarily adjoining properties.
I'll put it on then. So we know there was a lot of outside the rebound, the meeting to try and change the zoning for that area. Has there been outreach and discussion with the public and community around the are they supportive of this at this point? Greatly, was there opposition to changing the zoning of that property, or was it also? Do you have any? I guess there's no one, or there's not a lot of people right now to give public input. So, and if you think there is support, can you provide maybe letters or be sure they attend the next meeting?
So I was brought into the project after the initial meetings, so I can't speak directly to that, other than I was told that there was public competition. We fully intend to provide letters of support from the adjacent neighbors, including the church. I know the prior owner, who's also actively involved in seeking this approval, along with more, has had discussions with the people from the housing authority. They have identified that they have significant concerns the way it's proposed now. My sense of it was that the idea of the zoning creep of industrial closer to, there's housing. The idea of the industrial zone creeping closer, because when you look at the industrial zone, you look at what's allowed in there, it's kind of frightening to have that heading towards where you reside. So I think we've taken that concern off the table by seeking something that would be strictly limited to what JJ Cone does. So it wouldn't be able to have that threat of industrial zone.
Well, it could be a couple of other things, right, but
Correct. Correct.
limited, more limited.
Yes.
And then can you just remind us, like, when do we need all this by so that it's in the record for the next?
Yeah, I think it's a week before. I'll have to double check. Yeah.
But then circle back so that it's all in the record. Yeah, the next meeting.
No, I guess, so when determined that it's heavy commercial services?
That was the determination that the planning officer made. I let him speak to that. I was trying to argue as artisan manufacturing because it's a specialty thing that they do, and if they are artisans, they really are craftsmen. What they do is offering with their forms. And that artisan manufacturing is allowed on base South End, so we wouldn't be here if that was a determination. But the determination was heavy commercial services was the most appropriate definition based upon what having investments.
I mean, just to speak to it briefly, I think part of it is I still don't know that I fully, completely understand the activity
that's going to be occurring at the property. I do understand that from the photos that they make basketball courts and do some specialty work. It's not clear to me that that's the full scope of their work. And again, some of these are pretty substantial jobs that they're working on. So again, there's no opposition to potentially revisiting that, but based on the information that I had at the time, it struck me that this was beyond scope of what we traditionally consider artisan manufacturing. And I think you know as well that there needs to be some additional outreach to specific members of the community and specific organizations. And we can certainly put you in touch. And that is an important consideration to this application. I don't know the extent to which I've heard, different opinions as to where different entities stand in support or opposition. So I think those letters are particularly important. And I think some of it may require clarifying the scope of the work that's going to occur at the site with them as well, because I think there's just a little bit unclear as to what exactly the tenant is going to be doing. And you had mentioned it's quite a small site, how their operations are going to function there without spilling over the boundaries onto the street and into the housing authority property across the road. And also I would just mention the city's South End Connector Trail, which we're doing a series of improvements on right now, is located directly adjacent to would be the right side of that screen, that sort of angular piece that comes out there. So I really think we need to reevaluate or evaluate whether those parking spaces there are in conflict with I believe it's a basketball court that's going adjacent to there. So just where that property line lies with respect to our project. So I think there's some elements of the site that just need a little bit more fleshing out. We'd be glad to have a working meeting with you to answer some of those questions.
I appreciate that.
I would add just echo that, like, in particular, if there are specific, areas of concern that were noted in the previous public meetings on this, I think finding direct responses to some of those and showing like a good faith effort to address some of those. So for example, if it was like, we're really concerned this is just a parking lot and you're perpetuating this industrial, character amidst an area where they're looking for, vibrant mix of residential
and like creating opportunities for investment, like something like a landscaping plan, like something that shows like you're trying to mitigate the extent to which this green, industrial or heavy commercial. I think things like that also demonstrate like you are trying to, bring economic opportunities and be a contributing member of the neighborhood and just sincerely care about addressing the concerns. That's something I got.
Thank you.
Oh. And I think, can you walk us through your understanding of the parking spots, right? There's the like white line on the site plan. I understand you have four that allows for the parking spots on the left side of the building. And there's an access to the right. So if we start with the left side, so that means you're coming in through like this Vine Street, right?
Yeah.
And then you part and I mean, I didn't look at the details of like, are these spots meant for like regular size cars or the truck trucks or for the actual delivery truck? And what does your client need to use this for?
And I'll confirm with the engineer for you. I believe the elongated spots on the left side are for their trucks. When I say trucks, they're vans, they're like cargo vans, they're not tractor trailers. And then the parking to the extent that you could park some employees in there, we don't have any specific remarks, but the other side of the building would be parking for employees. And again, we estimate that they have 7 employees. And a lot of those employees are installers, so they won't even come here. They'll meet somebody to pick up the truck. So that's a switching vehicle. So somebody drives a little vehicle here, picks up the truck, and then drives to the site and meets 3 or 4 other employees. But that results in the vehicle being there full time. The van, when it's out, is replaced by the driver's vehicle during the day. And it's anticipated that on the right side would be with that part place. There would be, a small office component to this, and that those would also be the employees that would be parked on that right.
That's 2 spots.
I believe it's.
And so the current plan, it looks like they drive in a car and means all the cars have to back up and it looks pretty narrow. And then you back up and you're backing up on Vine Street, which is one way, and so like backing up to where the map disappears from the screen here onto your right, then you're back into the flow of traffic, probably heading to Wall Street to get back on the highway.
It's a little difficult to see on there, but on that side, there's enough room to maneuver inside to be able to, by the time you get to green, be facing out. It's not easy maneuvers, but it can be done. And the idea on the right side is that extra pavement right up until the corner of the property as far as possible, so those vehicles can, access, facing out. Even when there's somebody in that third spot, which is that little paved area that goes down. It's not, it's not a perfect symptom. There's not much to work with. They're working with what they have. But I think every vehicle, if it was completely parked and full, every vehicle would still have the ability to maneuver to be heading face out even on the green.
Would an accessible parking slip be required here? Is that something that
Don't like to answer questions I don't know the answer to. I'm entirely sure.
is something we consider?
It's something that's not pretty.
But an employee, right, still would possibly require an accommodation.
I'm with Commissioner Glass. We want the answer things that I'm going to answer.
Right,
We'll find out.
just something I think about, right, like a site plan and showing that you think about this, not just as like, this is where we make money, but this is where like people work and,
Candidly, I'd be surprised if one isn't.
So it looks like there's been mention of some work being done on the building already to start, start setting up the building.
Yeah, I think once they acquired it, I think they had to get in and restabilize. It had been vacant for a long time. I don't know that it's proceeded past stabilization. Everybody's aware that, should they get their modified variance approval, they still need, development plan review approval from the planning board. So don't go too far out on that list because the planning board may bring it back. So they're aware of that. I think my understanding is it's stabilization.
Can you just tell me through, so 1986, that was the automotive variance, which would now be general manufacturing? Is that accurate? I don't know.
We haven't gotten into making those direct comparisons. I just know, for instance, heavy commercial services did not exist in our code prior to 2017. That's a classification that's relatively specific to contract groups of varying types. I don't recall specifically what that was under prior.
Okay, but the heavy manufacturing is under manufacturing, production, and extraction, whereas the heavy commercial services is under commercial services.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm trying to like just track the timeline. So we're at 1986, the automotive
And
one.
keep in mind the timeline also has a separate parallel. So I don't know, for the record 1986 was ready. So I don't know if the zoning definitions that existed in 86 or 94 for that matter carried over to now. So what I have to work from is the documentation for the variance requests, and then the USD on that. And I completely agree with you that under the USDO, each type of zoning classification, housing, commercial or industrial, underneath it has subcategories. And as you go through those subcategories, the uses get more intense. Is my understanding of the intent behind the USDO. So in the industrial uses, the three subcategories are commercial services, and then manufacturing, production, and extraction, and then waste and salvage. And as you go through those, they get progressively more intrusive, more industrial. I don't know how to explain it. But heavy commercial services is commercial, which is the least intense, whereas the light manufacturing, the light industrial manufacturing, which was granted by the variance, would, I believe the closest would be light manufacturing, which is in manufacturing, production, and extraction, which is the more intense group of uses than what we're proposing. So we're proposing one in the least intense group of industrial.
Okay. And then so again, 1994, that was the manufacturing variance was granted. And then in 2022 and 2023, that you had or your client had requested zoning map amendment, at least for the information here it says. So, but it was for a light manufacturing use at the property.
I think they were less concerned about classifying the use and more focused on changing the zoning stuff. They were seeking to change the zoning classification to industrial, light industrial. So if that was granted, they would have been allowed everything that's allowable in the I-1 zone.
I think what I'm trying to ask is if at one point you wanted to do light manufacturing and light manufacturing was already allowed under the 1994 variance, why did you see that zoning map amendment?
Because we were informed that the city's interpretation was the use would be heavy commercial service.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's always been the same use. It's always been the same people we're trying to place here.
Yeah, well, it has changed because it was artisan and then at one point light manufacturing. Now we're having commercial services, or at least in terms of the interpretation.
We could go back and assess where heavy commercial services use, or this use specifically would have been classified under prior codes. That's something that would be helpful for the board, but I mean, the classifications aren't identical. So, I mean, I think, frankly, in the case of variances, sometimes I've seen things that weren't even listed uses in the code that granted the variance for a particular thing. So it's not a perfect science, but we have to research that.
No, I think there's there's a reason why I'm asking these questions, but I think it's not.
When the request is made to the meeting, because the prior owner was already in discussion with David, and they looked at it and said, you know, would it work here? And they, I believe, initially thought it would either work under the variance or it would qualify as artisan manufacturing. The city then looked at it and said, no, we're going to classify it as heavy commercial service. That's the best thing. So once that determination was made, we either needed the rezone, which they applied for, which candidly wasn't well received, or now seeking to modify what they already have without extending the industrial to modify the existing variance to reduce the scope of it down to the heavy commercial. And I don't, but my knowledge of the zoning process from 1986 and in 1994 was drastically different than what currently exists now. The city has a well-written zoning code and a professional staff that is very professional and good at what they do. And now land use boards that are also very good at what they do and applying the law as required. I can't say that it was the same environment in 94. I think, again, I can't speak to it. I don't know that the analysis given projects now and the scrutiny given projects now is at the same level that it was in 1994. My suspicion was it was substantially less. And that's not a bad, you know, I'm not being critical. It's a good thing that now it's being looked at properly. I just can't say for sure that how strong the analysis was in 94.
Is there a question about that whether the activity, the use proposed at the site can be considered to already fall under light manufacturing, which is already allowed under the last use variance?
And there's a
And if so, then there's no.
well, yeah, there's a sentence in the staff memo that maybe it just says the CMA was requested to change the zoning district to light industrial to allow for a light manufacturing use.
That's so I know where you're going with this, Martha. Yeah, so I think you're looking for a timeline. I just pulled up the previous application. So they did apply for light manufacturing of wooden floors. So it was a different use that they're applying for now. I think Andy, I don't know if you want to answer this, but maybe the use changed because of the way it was perceived by the public, but originally they did want to manufacture the wooden floors there, whereas now I think they want to warehouse and store the wooden floors, but they don't want to manufacture it there at that location currently. But I will say in the zoning map amendment application, it says this building is uniquely suitable for light manufacturing of wooden floors for the following reasons.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And my understanding is warehouse, storage, and you know the place at the beginning of the morning when a job goes out. I don't know, and I'll confirm this. That's an important question. I'm not aware of any plan to manufacture floor in there, but I will confirm that. I also, I apologize. I now understand where you were going. Sorry, it took me so long. I would also argue that this board has the ability to make an interpretation that's what's proposed already falls with underneath the existing variance. You would have that ability. The test that would be applied is whether or not that determination is rational and supported by substantial evidence in the record. But you, that is an authority you would have. You could say, you know, Rick, nice try modifying it, but you don't need to. You know, we find that what you're proposing is already allowed under the existing regs. That is something you could do.
Okay, so yeah, we have a couple of like avenues that we go down to compartmentalize. We have the interpretation of the art and end use of the light manufacturing use of the servicing use that are at the avenue that we're currently on. Okay, we're looking at this as heavy commercial services. How do we get there? Either from light manufacturing use or what we're getting.
Correct, but procedurally,
To demonstrate that business is either like manufacturing, which is allowed, and we don't even have to know. But compartmentalizing that, if that's, I don't know if that is, then you probably have to apply for an interpretation of that.
well, I think this board would have the authority, as long as it was done rationally based upon the record, to determine our request for modification by saying it's unnecessary and moot because what you're proposing only falls underneath the existing allowable. You would have that authority. Whether or not you choose to exercise it is up to you, but you would have that authority. And again, I don't not to overlord it, but the issue of artisan manufacturing versus heavy commercial services, that appeal isn't technically before you. That's something that would require a separate appeal, appealing the decision of the planning officer. And that's not before. That hasn't.
Okay, we're on the same page. Yeah. Okay, so that's the side. Also, does anyone, I can stop talking.
I think because of this conversation, I think for the next meeting, either for presentation or, you know, a couple of people that in the record, I think we would need a lot more details and like serving from your applicant on what is the use that's being proposed for the property. Like what exactly is going to be, you know, what hours is it going to be? How many employees are going to be there doing office work? What office work are they going to do? And then, you know, what is going to be stored? How is it going to be stored? Is there going to be any manufacturing at all done on this? Yeah, all those.
Sure.
Yeah, like give us all the details. So what is being proposed? How the site is being supposed to be?
Can do that. Yes.
Questions, we're talking about storing materials, things already.
Sure.
How often would the vans be loading and unloading material?
I think it would be every workday. I don't know if that is 5, 6, or 7 days a week, but my understanding of it is that, you know, and I haven't been many floors, but there's only so much floor you can install in a day. So they will load the trucks up, go to the site with the work that needs to be done, and then the next day the trucks might have to load up again to go back. So I think it depends upon the scope of the job. If it's a smaller job and you can roll all 3 trucks and take everything there and it's there in the gym and then they can place it, then it wouldn't be every day. But I can get that information for you based upon what they currently do. You know, what their frequency and what their routine is, which kind of ties into what we like. Good question.
And to clarify, you said that they're actually vans or are they trucks or both?
And I was going to add, I think photos of what
Yeah.
the truck look like. I mean,
It's a subjective term. Yeah, I agree.
It's
That's a very good
yeah,
point.
I think photos.
Yeah, I think it's hard for us to make decisions about a use variance when we don't understand
What these.
That's, I don't know if it's too technical, but if it's like, you know, we are, so I guess that we have to clarify at the next meeting of what the application actually is, what the use actually is, what the determination of the use is. But if we were, you know, going on the forward on the path of commercial services, having commercial services, Do you know if when you find off property, you do a title search, like, was there any additional information on this 1994 variance? What was the standard of review used for the 94 variance to get from the 86 to 94 variance? And what was the showing of economic hardship at that time?
Yes, I had everything I have, we have in the application, and some of it is not even letter, so, I don't have anything more. I can take a look at the title before I look at it. I don't know if the city has anything about that, but you have everything I have.
I requested the file from the Albany County Hall of Records. So I have it here. I could pass it around. I've also scanned it, but I have the relevant considerations the board considered for 94 and 86.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
could be added to
Okay.
this file and shared with the applicant as well.
That would be great.
Just got it today. No.
Thank you for getting those.
Mhm.
I wanted to echo what you said too about other mitigating factors that we are required, but, you know, putting in landscaping or.
No, I understood. It's a great point. And I apologize, I was so focused on the zoning jurisprudence of it. The third department with conditions versus the first department with modifications that I lost sight of the most basic things. How are you gonna make it look, what are you gonna do to improve the nation? So that's definitely, we can provide that.
And if there's any reframing, like based on what the public comments were historically, to, you know, put those into potential conditions.
Okay, sure.
I don't know if that's necessarily your job or the board does.
To clarify, because I'm reading here that it says the business employs more than 25 people. Did you say there were 7 employees, or could you just clarify how many employees
Yeah.
there are?
Yeah, the information I was given is that they have 7 employees who are mostly off-site. I will tell you. I'm gonna try and have them do it, mostly do directly from them.
And I think giving it, you know, it sounds like we're gonna consider some interpretations with that. You're gonna provide us some information, a lot more details on the use, some information, case law, some information about, you know, where the community stands at the point of its proposed use. I think those are the big things, that you're gonna. Yeah, some,
Sure.
and so I think in light of the discussion we've had and the consideration of these interpretations, I think we would welcome what you want to argue with your client. Yes, like, what do you think? Like, you know, I mean, I think in the meeting, you want to present the case of, you think it should qualify as our, right? Actually, you're not, we discussed it. You were saying it was different. You didn't approach it. When you said we could choose the two, we could elect to make an agreement. And so I thought you took that. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I want to hear what you want to argue.
Sure, I just,
As the applicant.
I just wanted to be clear that we have not appealed Commissioner Glass's interpretation. I was not going to do that. I don't question his judgment
And I
or
don't think that's what I
integrity.
was saying.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what I was recommending you do, but just that since we are, we have the ability to consider that, I think I want to know what the applicant thinks.
You know, and what I would propose is I would submit to you all the possible avenues of determination that I believe you could reach and then support that.
I just want to clarify, Andy, you made a comment earlier, I think that you weren't, it wasn't clear if if the applicant manufactured anything at the premises or intended to. Would that not take it out of a light or artisan manufacturing category? Just a thought. You don't have to.
Well, I was being careful because I don't know your specific definition of what constitutes manufacturing. So I have a note here to take a look at that. But yes, the circular logic, I can't argue to you tomorrow that we're artisan manufacturing and then come back to the board next month and say there's no manufacturing. Yeah, I gotta look at that definition.
They said the traffic study was done, a dust and study, and a noise study were all done, like conducted. It says on their presentation, they did a traffic.
I think a lot more information on use would be helpful, like, and just like explicitly looking at definitions, right? Like heavy commercial services are commercial services with more incentive impacts than things such as laundry services, lumber yards, like make a comparison between those exact examples that are given, whether it's more intensive or it's not, like that helps us inform our definition, like, or not inform, but inform our interpretation based on the explicit text that we are tasked with applying to this.
And maybe other examples of any commercial services in the city, whether it's in zones that they're allowed in.
Particularly if they were seen in this most recent USDO versus ones that are 30 plus years old.
And with everything happening with 787, I was constructing the comprehensive plan, but making some comparison or using the comprehensive plan as like your North Star for.
Yeah, I think an acknowledgement of the significant social changes that the city, I think, and its community aspire to see in that direction, and how you can possibly contribute to that positive movement. Be it because you're an artisanal maker of beautiful wooden floors, or because you have a nice landscaping plan or a community bright mural on your building, whatever it may be, like show us the possibilities that everyone in Albany is excited about, so that we can take that into consideration as we interpret this act.
It's not a problem.
Just the feedback on what Paige was saying, I know that there's a pretty security issue in that area, so that's something that we thought about next year. Landscaping or roads, et cetera, it's that effect. I just felt like I needed to say that.
Thank you.
No one hires me for the easy one.
Great. So, still no one for public comment online?
You know, I wasn't, but I do have just a quick question, and it might not be something that you're able to answer, but. Oh, yeah.
Put it on the record. Yeah.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
It's
Public. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Sure.
Sure.
Bye.
It'll probably make you sad.
So my name is Alex Ward and I live on Manning Boulevard. I just had a question about the operations and another question about the use. But regarding the vans, or the vehicles, the work vehicles, obviously there's going to be materials loaded into those vans, and does that require machinery that makes a noise? Sound is one of those things that we can't see, but it has a profound effect on the neighborhood. And yeah, that was all.
That's a really good question.
Thank you.
on the person, like, the current location, what decibels? You bring the higher down in here. They can hear it out.
Very good.
So that has the majority as well, so that you can still off the trucks. And that basketball court that. Yeah, safety concerns, given that I have concerns there are children. Residential housing in the area, so. Yeah, I should think Wizards Wardrobe is located in that.
I do want to say, in the presentation, it does say a noise study was conducted, a traffic study and a dust and odor study. Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you could send that, send the results of those to us, that would be
Already made a note.
appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have to approve the minutes, yeah, the meeting minutes from, thank you, for June 21st. I sent it with the agenda. The date for the minutes are June 21st.
Make a motion to approve the meeting. Second. Yeah, that's fine. Second. Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.